Greetings, minions and associates. If you are already a minion and you would like to tithe, please hit like. If you would like to become a minion, please follow. If you would like to confess, please do so in the comments. If you would like to evangelize, please share. Today we're going to be talking about, actually we're going to be reviewing different RBT, that's a registered behavioral therapist or technician, I think is what it is, training videos to see what they are actually teaching the ABA therapist, and it's not good, I assure you. So let's take a look and see exactly what they have to say and see where any problems arise, if any.
Such a good job sitting, Jillian. All right, it's time to work. What do you want to work for?
The baby.
You want to work for baby? All right, let's work for baby. Okay, touch your nose. Good job touching nose. Touch your ear. Good job touching ear. Show me your elbow. Good job touching your elbow. Okay, show me your tummy. There's your tummy. Good job. Touch feet. Good job touching your feet. Show me your eye. Where's your eye? There it is. Good job. All right. Touch your elbow. There's elbow. Good job. Touch your knee. There's your knees. Very good. Okay. Touch your nose. There's your nose. Good job. All right. Last one. Touch your tummy. There's your tummy. Great job. Here's the baby. Yay. Good work.
So we deprive the kid of a toy to force them to do something, to do really just stupid things. All these things that they're teaching, any parent can do at home. Any NAT situation, an actual, real, true NAT situation, it teaches that kind of thing. It really surprises me how they are doing this. There's just zero reason for it. But anyway, that's really not much of a critique, just to say that there's no reason to do it. So let's just move right along. Hopefully they'll give us some commentary here and talk about how wonderful they are. No, I'm not going to pause the video. So this video is definitely set up for a class. So I think without the rest,
What do you want to work?
okay, without the rest of the class, the curriculum, that one's pretty hard to do. Hey, we can try this one.
Develops at slightly different paces. Almost everyone has
Well, come on.
the same general developmental milestones and learns the same sets of skills at about the same time, more or less. These are things like language.
Actually, let's see how old this is, because I think what they're saying here, yeah, this is out of date and it's wrong. Already.
Even though everyone develops at slightly different paces, almost everyone hits the same general developmental milestones and learns the same sets of skills at about the same time.
That is not correct. Autistic people, our brains actually grow faster when we're very young than, this is like prior to 18 months, I believe. Our brains develop a lot more younger than most people. So there is definitely a difference there. And that's just been recently pretty much found out about. So, but moving right along. Oh, you notice that this is all white, by the way. It's supposed to be on autism and so forth, and they have an all white screen. And nobody bothers to ever say that how much this hurts autistic people like it's hurting me right now.
More or less.
More or
These are
less.
things like language and communication, socializing, cognitive skills like problem solving, and physical milestones like walking, crawling, and fine motor skills, all of which progress as the brain develops.
Mm-hmm.
If one of these doesn't develop as scheduled, depending on the severity, it may be described as a type
As scheduled.
of neurodevelopmental disorder. Neuro referring to the
Oh, this.
brain.
Okay. If this keeps
Especially
up, I'm
when
gonna have
certain
to
skills
drop
related
kick
to
that thing.
socializing and communicating don't proceed as normally, it can result in isolation, which is where the name autism originated. Since auto
Okay, so the neurotypical, what a neurotypical person is a person that is not autistic, or actually not on the spectrum. That means not. So the people that are on the spectrum pretty much are your um, people who have Tourette's, schizophrenia, ADHD, autism. There's a couple of others in there, but that's what's considered the spectrum. So people who are not on the spectrum are called neurotypical, and then we're called neurodiverse. Now, we can also separate autism and to what we call allistic people as opposed to autistic people. Now, allistic people are people who are not autistic. So yes, you are correct. It is the opposite of neurotypical, or what neurodiverse is. And my video's acting really weird. I don't. Well, okay. We're gonna say goodbye to Twitch.
means self. So autism refers to a
Okay,
condition
we'll give you
where
one more
somebody
chance.
might be removed from social interaction and communication, leaving them alone or isolated. Before 2013, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, the 4th edition, or the DSM-4, described autism as one of several pervasive developmental disorders, which also includes Asperger's syndrome, childhood disintegrative disorder, and those not otherwise specified, or PDD-NOS. Asperger's syndrome was used for children that appeared to have characteristics of autism, like difficulties with social interactions or nonverbal communication, but don't generally have significant...
And Asperger's doesn't exist anymore. It's not a... neither does childhood disintegrative order or PPD-NOS. None of these exist. It's only autism spectrum disorder now.
delays in language or cognitive
I'm going to just skip through that because
disintegrative
it's...
disorder was used to describe sometime between age 2 and 10. 5, a new revised edition, removed these terms and replaced them with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, which encompasses all of the previous pervasive developmental disorders, but uses a scale, or a spectrum, that differentiates based on the severity of two major areas.
Okay, this is just
social
about...
communication and interaction deficits,
Okay.
and restricted...
Unfortunately, this is just about autism, and I want to know about actual skills training and so forth. Okay, here's one. What is this? It says there's 40 videos. I don't know who this person is.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here on time.
The importance of motivation.
Kind of come in late,
No,
they'll be
we don't.
busted because I think they're.
I want more specific RBT competency assessment examples and mock practice. Okay, we'll try this one.
All right, RBT competency assessment. I'm a BCBA. This will be a mock practice of the measurement section of the RBT competency. I will go through and conduct this as if it was real life in your official one. So as I'm asking questions, pause, try to answer the question, see if you get it right. If not, come back to it after you've studied a little more. So let's jump right into it. So the first one would be continuous measurement, and all of these could be either with a client, role played, or interview style. So for continuous measurement, I'm going to be asking you about continuous measurement. So if I were to ask you what is frequency, you would say count. If I were to ask you to measure the frequency of nose touching, you would say 3. If I were to ask you what duration is, you would say the length of the behavior. If I were to ask you to measure the duration of me touching my nose, you might say 3 seconds. If I were to ask you what latency is, Latency is the time between the SD and the beginning of the response. So if I were to ask you to measure the latency of nose touching, and I said touch your nose,
Notice how we're just focusing on the therapist and giving commands here to the autistic person. This is not about the autistic person. There's nothing, no mention of the autistic human being. It's just procedural stuff, and no mention of the well-being of the autistic person whatsoever.
you might get 2 seconds. And finally, if I were to ask you what inter-response time was, inter-response time is the length of time between the end of one behavior and the start of a similar behavior. So let's measure the IRT of nose touching. You might have got 3 seconds. There's 3 seconds between each touch of the nose. The next one will be discontinuous measurement. So that's partial, whole interval, and momentary time sampling. If I were to ask you what partial interval is, that's if the behavior occurs at all during the interval, you count it. If I were to ask you what whole interval measurement is, the behavior has to occur the entire duration of the interval for it to count. And if I were to ask you what momentary time sampling is, the behavior would have to occur at the end of the interval for it to count. So let's measure in 5-second intervals. Let's measure nose touching using partial interval. So you would record that as a yes because it occurred within the 5 seconds. Let's measure whole interval, 5 seconds of nose touching. You would count that as a no because it only occurred 1 second out of the 5. And then finally, let's measure momentary time sampling, nose touching. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be a yes because it occurred at the end of the interval at 5 seconds. And then finally for measurement, data and graphs. This is going to be dependent on where you work and how you take data, but you need to be familiar with the data taking system. So if I'm asking you again to measure frequency, I need to.
Okay, today I will cover the entire RBT competency assessment. I know this one says initial, but the initial and the renewal, they're the exact same thing, right? The difference is the initial you complete before you take your exam, and then the renewal you complete whenever your license is about to expire. Either way, it
Howdy,
covers
Trevor.
the same material, and you need to take both. Okay, so what I'm going to do, all right, is I'm going to go through and act as your BCBA, okay, and I'm going to my best ability, do both the interview, okay, and then the role play, and with the client assessment types for each task, okay.
So I've decided, I did the 100 hours of Autism Speaks. Now I've decided that I'm going to study for the RBT exam so that I can pass the RBT exam. That's what I'm doing. I'm studying for it. However, I am also critiquing it as I go live because there is a lot wrong with what they teach. For example, here, this is the test here, the actual real test that we're going to go over here. This is for the BABC test. So, but this is from the BABC, which is the organization, but it's the RBT exam. But what they're not going to mention is the well-being of the autistic person ever, and it has not been mentioned once. I've got 26 hours now. 26 hours of doing this, so that's what I'm up to right now.
So I'm a BCBA who does competency assessments, all right? So I'm going to do my best to show you what we're looking for, right? So I'm going to go through each item, okay, map out each. So follow along. I'm going to put timestamps below so you can jump around to what you need help on, okay? The main thing with the competency assessments is you shouldn't be nervous, right? They're not meant to be tricky, okay? You just want to be sure that you know the basics. That's what we're looking for in competency assessments, the basics, okay? So, where would you start? Well, again, the initial
beginning, maybe?
and the renewal are the same. So whatever your name is, your name, okay, would go here. And then your ID, whatever it is in the system, okay, would go here. Now, as a BCBA, all right, we can either do this with a client or role play, okay, or an interview style, depending on the type, okay. Given COVID, there's been a lot of role play, right? It's just the nature of it, but sometimes you'll be with the client, it just depends. So I'll write your name, I'll write your ID, okay, and then we'll get into each task, okay. So we'll start with measurement, right? So continuous measurement, okay. So the assessment type here, let's say, is interview. So I'm the BCBA, and I'll ask you, how would you take frequency data? You would tell me, okay,
Frequently.
I would count how many times the behavior occurs. Frequency is count. I would say, how do you take duration data? You would say, I would record how long the behavior lasts, because duration is how long the behavior lasts, right? Latency and IRT, how would you take latency data? Well, it's the time between me giving the instruction, okay, and the behavior starting. And then how would you take IRT? IRT is the time between two responses, okay? That's interview for continuous measurement, okay? You would do well, I would check you off. Now, what about role play, okay? Take frequency data on, so to take frequency data on me touching my nose. Okay, you would record what? 1, 2, 3. Frequency of 3. What about duration for touching my nose? 1, 2, 3, 4. You would say 4 seconds. Okay. What about latency for touching nose? You would say touch your nose. 2, 3, 4, 5. Touch. Okay. The latency between saying touch your nose and me touching my nose, 5 seconds. What about IRT for touching nose? Okay. 1, 2. 2 seconds. Time in between touching my nose was 2 seconds. Okay. There you go. That's continuous measurement, right? If you had a client, it would be the same idea. Okay. All you would do is take your very simple measurements, your continuous measurements. Okay. And that's all we're looking for in our assessments, right? We want to see, can you do the basics? Okay. It's not here to trick you or make you nervous. We want to be sure that when you go see a client and we're not there, you can do the basics. So continuous measurement, you aced, okay? Now let's talk about discontinuous measurement. Interview. Me as the BCBA might ask you, how is discontinuous measurement different than continuous, okay? Or you might say, we only take data on certain parts of the session, okay? You might say, continuous measurement, I take data on all behaviors. Discontinuous measurement, I only take data for 20 minutes, okay? Discontinuous doesn't happen during the entire session, okay? I might say name name 1 or 2 discontinuous measurement procedures. You could say partial interval, you could say whole interval, you could say momentary time sample. I would say, explain partial interval to me. You would say,
Okay, I will be right back.
partial interval, the behavior
Moving right along.
counts as an occurrence if it occurs at all during the interval. I would say explain whole interval. You would say if the behavior occurs during the entire interval, it counts as an occurrence. And then momentary time sampling, you would say if the behavior occurs at the end of the interval, it counts as an occurrence. Okay? And that would be your interview. Now, what about role play? So, for partial, okay, partial, whole, and momentary, okay, we need an interval. Let's say 10 seconds. Okay? So, how would you take partial interval data? Well, our first interval, right, 10 seconds, then 20, okay, then 30, okay? And then you would take data, okay? You would have your stopwatch, your iPhone timer, whatever you're using, right? So we're taking.
Hey, King, how you
time
doing?
Data, right? So we need time, okay?
Doing all right. Now I am. I am basically studying to take the the RBT test. I think I'm going to jump off of this, get back into where they're really explaining it. This is here. He's really explaining how to take the test, which is very boring. Yeah, I'm
RBT comp.
I'm taking a look at these things that they're reviewing, like this discrimination and differentiation.
All right, welcome. Today
Here we go.
we're going to cover
And this is really going to
discrimination and differentiation in a
really teach the hardcore aspects of what they actually do teach. This is actually a
start with
pretty
our
good,
summary.
pretty good series. I'm going to go with verbal behavior because I've already looked at. Well, you can see I've looked at a bunch of these already. So let's just move right along with it.
Verbal behavior, in other words, verbal operants. Okay, it's what we call each modality.
Oh, thank you.
Of verbal behavior. And verbal behavior in ABA.
There, that's probably a lot better.
There's a speaker and a listener. Okay.
Let's see.
And when you're
Right
taking
there.
your exam, you need to be really careful about who you are being asked about. In other words, is the question asking about the speaker behavior or the listener behavior? Because it matters. Okay. Socially mediated means there are more than one party involved. Okay. With verbal behavior, we are concerned with function over form. We're more concerned with what purpose does the language serve. What
Is it
purpose
better
does
now?
verbal behavior serve rather than what it looks like. And finally, what do you
It looks like it's blown out to
Emotional
me.
behavior.
I got to turn it
Why
back
is the
down a
verbal
little bit.
behavior occurring? Is it verbal SD?
Try right.
etc.?
Look.
What reinforces
Yeah.
behavior? Okay, what
Let me see.
maintains and increases that
There
verbal
we
behavior?
go. Probably right in
Is
there.
there
Is
form or similarity?
that right?
Meaning, is the form of communication the same or
I
different?
don't know why I'm having so much difficulty with my with my mic right now, but I am. Is it still messed up or is it okay? Did the volume come up? This is so weird. Okay, yeah, it's a little bit low. Try to turn it back up. Okay, I'm gonna try it there. Let me see what it looks like. I'll cheat. It was doing fine earlier because I checked it. I actually checked on the I checked on here we go. Is it live? No. Am I even live? I'm trying to see if I'm live on YouTube. I'll be damned. All right, well, I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to mess around with it. Live. Okay. Damn, to see if I'm live on YouTube. Yeah, see, it sounds good on my phone. Damn. So, yeah, I can hear it on my phone, okay. It sounds okay. It doesn't sound screwed up. So, that's a good thing. So, I don't know what it is. We shall see. Okay. See if I'm live on YouTube. Yeah, see, it sounds good on my phone.
Different? And is there point-to-point
So,
course?
I thank you.
What is being communicated? Is it exactly alike, or is it not? So
I
that is
think
what we're
I
going
must
to
have
look
gotten it
at as we
fixed.
go through each verbal operant associated with verbal behavior. Mands. First off, okay? Mands, I think everyone is pretty familiar with, right? When we man for something, when a client mans for something, what are they doing? Well, they're making a request. They're asking for something, whether it's to gain access to an item, get out of doing something, they're making a request. A man is evoked by a motivating operation, meaning something is motivating this person where there's an establishing operation or an abolishing operation for a consequence. So the man is there to maybe escape from something due to an MO, or we're trying to gain access to something due to an MO. The most common form is hunger, right? The hunger is the MO to man for food. So when we talk about mans, and this is very important, if it's not evoked by an MO, it's not a man. And we're going to look at tax next. But if you see an object, let's say a cookie, for example, and you say cookie in the presence of a cookie, that isn't a mand, okay? The mand has to come from the MO. And then it's reinforced by the requested item. So how do we man train? Well, whatever the speaker requests for, we need to deliver. That's how we're going to train them to continue manding for that. So if they're manding for attention, provide attention. If they're manding for escape, provide escape, so on and so forth. Some basic examples of mands. Cookie, please, meaning I'm hungry, I want a cookie.
Now, I just want you to take into perspective here that the well-being of the patient here is never ever taken into consideration. It's never even mentioned. The psychological well-being of the person is not ever mentioned. Their past traumas or anything else. Basically, the subject here, or the learner, as they like to put it, is not taken into consideration at all. All that matters is power and control, what we're going to force that kid to do. That's what we care about. We want to change behaviors because these horrible, horrible autistic children with autism, with that horrible disease autism, are misbehaving. They are acting out, and damn it, we're going to fix it.
What is your name? The MO is there's a person, I don't know your name. There's value in obtaining that name. So I say, what is your name? And this is where it's important, okay, when we're talking about the speaker or the listener, okay, because we're looking at the behavior here. If the listener...
And I love how asking for a cookie is called a behavior. Asking somebody's name is called a behavior. Saying, put me down, that's a behavior. That's a behavior. Yeah. So they're hurting the kid. So the kid says, put me down, because they're getting hurt. At least I used to get hurt. My mom used to pick me up by my arm, and because I have Ehlers-Danlos, I would dislocate. Every time she picked me up, my shoulders and everything would separate, and it hurt like hell. So yeah, I'd say put me down. But according to this man, that's a behavior. I was acting out because I was in pain. I was acting out. God forbid you ask somebody their name.
And then the listener is engaging in an interverbal. But the what is your name is the man. So you have to be very careful there, right? And then put me down, of course, is escape. It's a request, and it's evoked by the MO because you want to escape, I guess, being held or wherever the situation is occurring where you want to be put down. All these are evoked by an MO. They request, and they're reinforced by the requested item. So we would reinforce with a cookie. We would reinforce by saying our name, and we would reinforce by putting the person down. Okay, attacked. Attacked is a speaker labeling something in the environment. It's as simple as that. You see something, you label it. Therefore, it's evoked by a nonverbal SD. And when we mean a nonverbal SD, we mean it's not spoken, okay? It's not communicated. You see something, you label it. Very, very simple verbal operant. It's reinforced by a generalized conditioned reinforcer, meaning tokens and praises and money, all of those generalized conditioned reinforcers that can be used in a variety of settings. Because, for example, if I'm tacting a cow on the highway, how am I going to reinforce that person tacting the cow?
Okay, he was not very clear. What they're trying to do is teach the child to the request. That's what demand is. It's like a demand. Think of a demand. It's like a demand, but it's just a man. I don't know what the difference between man and demand is. I know a man is like a very, very primal request, basically, very basic request. It starts as an infant. Mand versus demand. A mand is a verbal behavior that involves making a request or demand. Specifically, a mand is a verbal request. So, what's the difference? What's the difference? Yeah, here we go. What's the difference? The difference between demand and mand is demand is a desire to purchase goods and services, while mand is a verbal operant response which is reinforced by characteristic consonant. Wow. No, I kind of don't think so. It when you say the word demand, it doesn't always mean goods or services necessarily. Why isn't mand or manding a real word? Okay. It's really hard to tell what the difference between a mand and... Okay, I'm going to look up demand and see what demand says by itself. An insistent request made as if by right. Okay, so a demand is a stronger man, is what it is. Okay. Wait until the positives and negatives. Oh my God! And the thing is positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and then you have the what is it? Positive and negative. Not reinforcement, but I forget what it's called now. But yeah, it starts to get a little bit confusing because you can have like a positive, negative reaction and stuff. Like what?
Well, I can't give them the cow, right? But I can praise them. I can give them a nickel. I can give them a high five. I can give them a token. I can use some sort of GCR, okay, to tact train. And the reinforced is important because when we're talking about training verbal operants, we need to know what is the proper way to reinforce.
Train him like a horse. Train him like a dog.
We want to reinforce labeling of things in their environment spontaneously, right? Spontaneously using GCR. When I say spontaneously, I mean if you ask somebody, what is that? And they tell you, that is not a tact. Why? Because it is evoked by the nonverbal SD. I mean, it's evoked by a verbal SD. If I say, what is that? And you tell me that's an intraverbal. We need to make sure it's evoked by the nonverbal SD. Remember, all this is the very basics. Okay, so we have tact extensions and things like that, but we're just worried about the very basic tact at this moment. Okay, if it's evoked by a verbal SD, it isn't a tact. It has to be evoked by a non-verbal SD. Some examples: cookie, in the presence of cookie. So I'm actually saying cookie. Compare that to manding, right? Where I want cookie. There's not even a cookie present. You're just in the presence of an MO, or the MO, in other words, is evoking the mand. In this case, you see a cookie.
Yeah, it's like positive punishment and negative punishment, and there's a such thing as a positive punishment. Give me a break. Come on. Okay.
Cookie. You label the cookie evoked by a nonverbal SD. We're going to
consider
attacked.
Exactly. Punishments. Positive and negative punishments. A positive punishment. Wow. And that one is confusing to me. The positive and negative punishments, I've still got to get that down because that's a bit confusing to me. A positive punishment, yeah.
So you see the cow, you say cow. Plane, when you see a plane in the sky, you see a plane.
But at least I remembered it, so I'm starting to get this stuff down. But the thing is this. What is amazing to me, the reason I'm studying this and studying all these classes is I want to point out how the patient is never taken into consideration. The well-being of the patient is never mentioned. It has not been mentioned once. The closest I've gotten is paying attention to the privacy of a patient. That's the very closest I've gotten. That's because that's a HIPAA thing. Punishment positive means to add or do something right. Add something for a punishment. Negative is to remove something or seclude. So yeah, if I guess a positive punishment would be I would be adding a spanking or adding time out or whatever, where negative would be taking something away, taking a toy away, or maybe they can't go to the birthday party of their friends or something like that, which would be negative punishment. I can see that. Just a weird concept. Just a very strange concept. And thank you, King. Yeah, it took me a while to figure that out. And once you mentioned it again, I had to hash it out in my mind. So technically, you, by mentioning it, actually have taught it enough for me to actually make it sink in by verbalizing it. So thank you for that.
You say plane. All of these are evoked by these nonverbal SDs. You're labeling things in your environment. Echoic, speaker repeat.
You know what? I made a video this morning, and I haven't been making videos recently, but I made a video that's what I learned. I learned when I was, second grade. I realized that these people were trying to manipulate me, and that pissed me off. Why? Because they didn't tell me what they were doing or why they were doing it. All they had to do was just talk to me and tell me what the fuck they wanted. But they didn't do that. Instead, they had to implement all this positive, negative reinforcement and positive punishments and negative punishments and all this crap. But I had no idea what the hell was going on. But I did recognize their end goal and what they were trying to make me do. Yeah, it's compliance training. Exactly. That is, I'm going to steal that fair and square. It is literally compliance training. And as that compliance training goes, it goes on to society, which, let's think about this. Compliance training is not needed for neurotypical people. You have to train autistics to comply because that's not how our brains work. We don't automatically just do stuff because everybody else does. We have to stop and think it through. I had a Mustang, and this Mustang was a wild Mustang. I had her on my place for about a year and a half. She was about four, I think, maybe 3 when I rode her. We didn't know exactly how old she was. She was still young, very young. But anyway, when I got on her back, I started out on her bareback, and with just a halter and a bareback is how I broke her. But the first time I came up to a stream, because she was a Mustang and she wasn't a regular horse, I gave her all of the rein. I let her have it. She put her head down, looked at the water, kind of played with it a little bit, and walked right through the stream. Every other horse we had launched because there was a stream there. They didn't know what it was. It freaked them out, so they just jumped. This Mustang was the autistic. It was the one that was smart enough to stop and figure it out on its own. So with that mare, I always trusted her, but I would always let her figure it out. I didn't just say, comply, do this. I didn't just make her go. If she stopped, her ears perked up, I let her check everything out, see what she was looking at, and then we moved along. And that's how the autistic brain works as opposed to the neurotypical brain. And so that's a very, very big differentiation to make. And thank you for that too. In fact, I might actually make a video out of that. I'm going to mark down my timestamp and I might just pull that out. But you're absolutely right. That's exactly what that is.
Repeats exactly what they heard. So echolalia, right? Very common in autism. Okay, very, very common. You say something, you give an SD, and the person just copies the SD, right? That's an echoic. It's evoked by a verbal SD, right? So I say something, or a speaker says something, and the listener responds with exactly what was said. If we're echoic training, we're reinforcing by GCRs like praises, money, and tokens. It has point-to-point correspondence, meaning what is said by the speaker is said exactly the same by the listener. And it has formal similarity, meaning the forms of communication
Absolutely.
are the same.
Absolutely. I've heard that analogy made before about cats versus dogs. The autistics are obviously the cats because we got to do crap on our own, whereas dogs are extremely sociable and all they care about is praise. They could give a shit less about eating. They could give a shit less about their well-being. They just want to be praised. They want that socialization. And cats don't give a crap. They're going to be there and they're going to figure it out on their own. And I think that's an excellent analogy for autistics versus holistic people. Absolutely. And it also helps people to understand the differences of how our brains work. And the way I put it in that analogy is, if you were to cure autism, then you would be trying to make a cat into a dog. If you were to cure my autism, the only way you could do that is to make a cat into a dog. And if a cat is now made into a dog, it's no longer a cat. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Oh, are you calling people dogs? Yeah, whatever. Get over yourself, right?
I say something, the listener says something. Spoken, spoken. The forms of communication are the same between the speaker and the listener. Some examples. I say cookie after my brother says cookie. There's point to point because cookie and cookie are the same. There's form of similarity because my brother says and I say, so the form of communication is exactly the same. And it's evoked by the verbal SD. Saying stop copying me after your mom says.
So, King, the reason I'm doing this is, obviously I've been through this when I was young. It was pre-ABA when they were experimenting. But like the tokens and just, they applied every single one of these techniques. It was ABA, it just wasn't named yet. The thing is when I talk about it now, I want to know from the other side, from the therapist perspectives, so that I can talk to them, and so they know that I know what I'm talking about, and they can't just write it off as, oh, well, he's just autistic and he just doesn't know what he's talking about, blah, blah, blah. No, I want to show them. I want to be able to use their lingo, and show them that, yes, I do. I have studied it, and I do know what I'm talking about. I was going to try to get my, my RBT, but then I found out that, like, I would have to go work for somebody for a little while and actually do it. Yeah, exactly. And I'm not taking anybody's training. I wish I could. But the other thing is even if I was to try to get training, if they looked me up at all, yeah, they'd probably kick me out immediately. Even if I was paying for it, they'd probably kick me out. So what I'm doing is I'm taking trainings online as I can. I'm just doing the free stuff, but yeah, exactly. I'm not going to pay for a course, but I can watch tons and tons and tons of videos, and there are tons of videos that break down every single question on those tests. And there are, I've seen at least 5 or 6 people that go through every single question on the test So I think if I can pass that test, and I know I can pass that test online, then I've done good enough. I've got the idea. I've got it down. And at least then I can communicate with RBTs. Yeah, yeah. Now there is a place probably close here that I know where there's a BCBA that I could basically walk to from where I'm at. But I just don't want to get involved with it.
Stop copying me. Verbal
like
SD,
like
point to point.
I'm afraid they would try to make me actually do ABA, and that wouldn't work.
Similarity. Form of similarity, in other words, is the mode of communication is the same. So how do we communicate? Well, we can speak, we can write, we can sign, we can give pictures. All those are the forms of communication. If there's form of similarity, then the form of communication is the same.
You know what's amazing to me is if you look into the military and basic behavioral science, the Crusaders, well, the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition used ABA. Flat out. They used behavioral science. Straight up. Because they were trying to extract information from the Knights Templars. And they did to a lot of them. Some of them they weren't able to. But many of them they were able to extract all kinds of information. Now, probably the information that they extracted was made up because people wanted to stop being tortured. But nonetheless, they probably did get a lot of good information too by torturing these people. And when you're doing mind control and torture or whatever to elicit information from prisoners, you use the same exact principles that we're talking about right here. So ABA is brainwashing. End of story, period. And it is a cult too. One of the big reasons it's a cult is they never ever mention the well-being of the child. I was in the medical field, and the well-being of the patient was number one. Absolutely, in every case. Patient, 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 patient. Number one, number one, number one, number one. We don't even mention the patient. We don't mention the patient's well-being. We don't mention their psychological, where they're at. We don't mention taking into consideration their past abuses or whatever else. There was one mention I heard where they were talking about a child they were having a hard time with ABA because they had bad ABA. Well, yeah, any ABA is bad ABA.
Point is what is being communicated.
And with what you were saying about the lives, particularly post-COVID, they really started doing the lives for the test. But if I could have see, I just don't think I could find a BCBA that would actually conduct the test for me. I guess I could call this local place and see if they would do it. I guess I could. Maybe I will call them and ask them if they could conduct the RBT test and just try to keep my mouth shut as much as possible.
And when what is being communicated is exactly the same, we say it has point to point. So when a COIC needs to be point to point, have form of similarity, and be evoked by a verbal SD. An intraverbal, okay? This is like our conversation, right? Speaker responds to another person with conversation, okay? Evoked by a...
Okay, you know what? I'm going to make a quick phone call here. And we are going to see if this local place does RBT testing. Because maybe they just will do RBT testing. Oh, wait, it's Saturday, isn't it? I forgot, it's Saturday. I'm going to call them Monday. I am going to call them Monday and see if they do the actual testing, because maybe they'll just conduct a test for me, not knowing who I am or whatever else. I know if I just can't let on that I'm on social media or who I actually am. I I don't think I'm known though. I don't think I'm known in this area yet, so that's a good thing.
So I say something, I say, what's your name? And you say, Alex. That is where you are engaging in an interverbal, right? If I say, what's your name? And you say, what's your name? That's going to be in echoic. Okay.
Clearly.
Start to understand why you need to know what the technicalities of each of these, right? It's reinforced through social reinforcement because we're communicating. There is no point-to-point correspondence. If there was point-to-point correspondence, it would be more of an echoic. And it may have form of similarity, but it doesn't have to. So if I say cookie, after your teacher says, what do you want? That is an interverbal. If I respond to Alex after someone says, what is your name? Again, it's an interverbal, right? Evoked by the verbal SD. There's no point-to-point correspondence. And then writing dog after your RBT says, what is it? So be careful here, right? We don't have point-to-point correspondence. It was evoked by a verbal SD. And even though it doesn't have formal similarity, it doesn't have to, right? We're still communicating with our response of, what is it? Dog. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So again, formal similarity is the mode of communication. May be the same. It might not be, though. And there's no point-to-point correspondence, meaning what is being said by the speaker and the listener is going to be different. An interverbal is most commonly known as a conversation. Again, we're just covering the very basics here. Yes, we can get much more technical here, but we're not trying to do that when we're learning, okay? Make it simple at first. And once you master the simplicity and you master the...
So King, did you do ABA for a period of time or briefly? Didn't you like briefly do it or something like that? Or because I'm kind of curious about how they approach certain things.
Simple parts, then we can dive deeper, okay? But we want to keep it as simple as possible at first, right? Because a lot of times it's all you really need.
Okay.
Okay, text rules. Text rules, speaker reads something, so we are reading. Essentially, that's what we're doing, right? It's evoked by a nonverbal SD, typically a written SD, right? Whether a sign or a book, whatever it might be. You reinforce with a generalized condition reinforcement.
The reason I'm asking is a lot of what... Wow, that's weird. Oh, hell no. Yeah, I wouldn't blindly consent to... Yeah, oh, hell no. Yeah. That's crazy. Well, you know, the thing is what a lot of it is, I hate to say this, but a lot of what I'm seeing is just parenting. Well, my kid's nonverbal. Well, try to help them speak. Don't just take them to ABA therapists and just drop them off and say, well, teach them to speak. Be a parent. I don't understand a lot of this because it's basic. A lot of it is basic parenting. Crap that other people shouldn't even be doing because it should be automatic. But I think there's a lot of people that their kids literally are not their number one priority. So, you know, they've got work and they've got bowling league and they've got, you know, trying to, you know, hook up with some guy or girl or whatever they're trying to do. They've got distractions. Whereas it for me, when I was raising my kids, my kids were my sole purpose in life. Like literally the only reason I went to work was like my bosses, why do you come to work? Because I got to feed my kids, because I got to raise my kids. It wasn't, I didn't give a crap about my work. And they wanted me to say that I was proud to be at work in there, but no. But I just found a lot of it is just basic parenting.
Sure. There is point-to-point correspondence because whatever you're reading...
Oh, even this right here. These examples right here. The kid can't ask for a cookie. We'll teach him to ask for a damn cookie. Use your words. Right? You ever heard that, King? Use your words? Amazing to me.
To read exactly as it is printed or written. And what you're being communicated.
It takes... I don't understand. It takes parenting from a narcissist perspective. I don't get that. Yeah. That's I use your words with my son a lot because he he would just try to point and get away with stuff, and he was able to speak. He literally was. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a power control dynamic, is what it is. It's that instead of being concerned about the well-being of the child, it's let's make this child do this. It's a power dynamic, and it's a really strange one to have in a medical situation that you would have a power dynamic. And the only time I've really seen that, well, yeah, yeah. The only time I've ever seen that kind of power dynamic, like I said, I was in the medical field. Say you have an elderly person and they don't give a shit anymore, so they don't want to take a bath or shower. They're in their 80s. They don't give a shit. They don't, they're not here to impress anybody. They're just want to watch their Wheel of Fortune. So they may become very, very resistant to showering or hygiene or things like that. And then I've seen providers who literally have to start treating them in a sense like a child and making them shower and so forth just for their own health and well-being. And that's literally what it's for, their own health. But I never have seen people giving showers or whatever just because they felt like it or whatever else. It's always been for a positive thing. So I can definitely see that. That's the only time I've ever seen that power dynamic with patients. When I was a medic, the closest I would ever do was if somebody like let's say they were in a motorcycle accident and tore up their leg a bit or something like that. I'd put a bandage on their leg or whatever and say, okay, hold this. And the reason is I would take control of the situation and I would say, hold this to keep them busy. So that way they weren't worrying about what the hell was going on. So in that sense, in emergency situations, I did use a power dynamic somewhat frequently, but that was an extenuating circumstance. And as soon as the emergency situation was over, I was back to myself and very, very passive. I may seem aggressive when I talk about this stuff, but I'm actually fairly passive. I just get worked up.
Is exactly the same as what you're reading, typically on a sign or a book. And there's no form of similarity, right? Because you're reading typically written word. Those forms are different. Some examples. You read cookie, printed on a cookie jar, okay? Evoked by the nonverbal SD. We have point-to-point correspondence because you're reading the word cookie exactly, but the form isn't the same. It's written versus you reading. Or you read out loud to a class from a book or a prepared speech. Point-to-point correspondence. What you read is exactly what is printed. No form of similarity. The form of communication is different. So reading versus written. And then transcription. Finally, writing something down that is spoken. Taking notes, transcribing something in a courtroom. It's evoked by a verbal SD. Someone's talking to you when you're writing notes. It's reinforced by a generalized conditioned reinforcer. There's going to be point-to-point correspondence because you're writing what the person is saying, and there's no form of similarity because you are writing and the person is talking. The forms are different. A few examples of transcriptions are taking notes, transcribing something in a courtroom. Again, point-to-point, writing exactly what is heard, no form of similarity, writing versus spoken. Point-to-point, no form of similarity.
I've always wanted to. I think it would be very funny to treat an RBT or a BCBA exactly like they treat autistic people. I think that would be hilarious.
It can be the hardest things.
Take them to the restaurant. Take them to the restaurant. Hamburger! 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 Good job!
Learn if you're brand new to this. It gives people the most trouble. The only way to do it is to practice. Write a bunch of examples out, do a bunch of examples, Try to identify, do I have point to point? Do I have formal similarity? Yes or no? All right. Especially if you're a BCBA taking the BCBA exam, you really need to know that. These questions are very easy. Verbal behavior, verbal operant questions should be very easy. Okay. Don't take them for granted. You want to get these points on your exam. So again, study, 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 point to point, and formal similarity. Make sure you understand it. And then finally, what do you need to know for verbal behavior? You need to know what evokes it. Is it going to be a verbal SD? What about a nonverbal SD?
I think what annoys me the most is what they teach is identify a behavior and you make a plan to change that behavior, essentially. And then you implement said plan, and then you document as you go to show that your treatment did work. And that's the premise. What is not included in that at all, ever, that I've seen, is evaluating the environment for, is there stimulus that are affecting the child? Or do we have fluorescent lights? Do we have bright sunlight? Do we have noise? Do we have humming of ballast from the fluorescent lights? Is there a smell? Is there something that's bothering that child? Do they have interception issues? Do they need to poo and not know it? Is that causing them pain, and do they not knowing it? Are they just simply restless because they're having a neurological issue? Because it is a neurological issue. That's the other thing that's not being taken into consideration. First of all, is their well-being. They're not taking into consideration past traumas. They're not taking into consideration where the child is psychologically and so forth. They just have a goal that they're going to make that child do. And so when you take the patient out of the equation, I don't see any possible way that could be helpful. The new ones will claim they consider it and that it's common sense, but then why is there no training? Exactly. They don't train. It's not part of it. And they're not trained to do that. That should be the very first thing in training, to consider all those things. Now, in fact, if you were to consider all those things and you identified those problems, you wouldn't have to address behaviors at all, for the most part. And sometimes a kid could just be acting out because they're a little jerk. That was me a lot. I'm still a jerk a lot of times. And that's possible too. Oh, yeah. They'll tell you they don't take into consideration neurology or psychology. And they shouldn't. Or they should. They should take in neurology and psychology. They have to. And past traumas. What are their experiences? Has someone